The Chief Minister of Gibraltar is not lying to the people of Gibraltar. This has been a very difficult year. And what we've done is say to the people of Gibraltar, at every stage, you're going to get the truth from the government of Gibraltar, however uncomfortable. And in the context of spending in respect of the health service, as Ms. Hassan Naon actually knows herself, there is no question of spending on the health services being cut in the next financial year. Look, the government has already handed to all members of Parliament this document. These are the estimates for next year. They are confidential until we start the debate in the House for the budget in summer, just before the summer. Ms. Hassan Naon knows what's in this book, although we cannot disclose it. She therefore knows that when we start to have the debate and the numbers become public, what she has said will be demonstrated to be untrue. And I'll tell you more. In the last 10 years, from 2008 to 2009, when we were not in office, to now, to the last published figures, we have doubled the amount spent on the health service. We've gone from 60-odd million pounds to near 130 million pounds spent on the health services available to every Gibraltarian. I think that's money well spent. We need to ensure that we spend it right, that we spend it well, and that where there is, as ever, we have to ensure there is no waste, but it is the right amount to spend. We're not cutting the cost of the health service. We've increased funding for the health service. The opposite of what Ms. Hassan Naon said yesterday.
Together, Gibraltar claim that cuts are being made now. They may not be direct cuts, but a reduction in the number of staff by way of not renewing vacancies. That's austerity by the back door, surely.
Well, but for goodness sake, you've got to realise that we are in a situation where we've just been through a global pandemic. Now, you and I are sitting facing each other, thank God. I've been up to Moorish Castle today doing my clinics. We can walk down Main Street as if nothing had happened. But only 6 weeks ago, we were still wearing our masks and we were still not able to travel freely, as is the case still today, from the United Kingdom, where people cannot travel to Gibraltar other than for work purposes, etc. So the world is still in the throes of this pandemic. Recruiting for the health authority is sometimes something that has to happen internationally, not just locally. So of course, in the health authority and in many other departments in the government and in many private enterprises in Gibraltar, in many private companies, recruitment is not what it would have been in other years. But it is absolute nonsense for Ms. Hassan Naon to suggest that the government is not investing in our health services. We have a huge amount, larger amount of doctors, of consultants in our health services, of nurses in our health services than ever before. So look, Ms. Hassan Naon can pretend that she would have invested more because she's never had to make a decision about budgets. But we've invested double what was invested by the GSD when they left office, and it was with the GSD that Ms. Hassan Naon first stood for election. We've put more people on the front line in health, more doctors, more consultants, more nurses. That's what a socialist government does.
So why haven't GHA services returned back to normal as yet, by your own admission in your press statement yesterday? You've been on television saying that Gibraltar welcomes tourists now and that Gibraltar's open for business. So why hasn't our GHA returned back to normal?
No. Let's be very clear, Ros. We have not got tourists back. We are planning to have tourists back, probably from the 17th of May. They're not here yet. We are going to have the health services back to normal, but we haven't yet got them back to normal. Why? Because you've got to realize, as everybody realizes who is reasonable and who understands the way that humans work, and government is an organization made up of humans, nothing else, that you cannot go from one mode to another as if you were flicking a switch. The public sector in Gibraltar has delivered a magnificent response to the past 14 months of the pandemic, including in particular the health services. As we ramp up from that response to the COVID pandemic to what we would call the day-to-day operations, we cannot have that happen like this. It would be, in my view, unfair and to lead the public up the garden path for Ms. Hassan Naon to pretend that she could have transitioned the GHA from the pandemic response to what we might call normal operations in a tighter or easier way than we are seeking to do in order to ensure that the general public have the service that they need from the GHA as from all the other departments of government for which we are responsible.
So by way of clarity, you don't intend making any cuts at the GHA and you do intend filling those vacancies as they come up?
Look, we're going to be seeing some consultants come to the end of their contract, and we're going to see those consultants replaced. We're going to be seeing some GPs, I assume, retire, come to the end of their contracts. We'll, of course, be seeing people recruited to fill those posts. There's no question of us not continuing to have the numbers of people that we need to have on the front line to provide the health services that this community deserves and expects. That's what these estimates show. And in June or July, when we have the budget debate, and you can come back to the interview Ms. Hassan Naon gave you yesterday and the interview I have given you today, I am extremely confident, because I wrote them and I published them with the Financial Secretary, that you will see that what Ms. Hassan Naon said was my lie will be demonstrated to be her untruth.
Well, the economy has taken a £227 million hit so far because of the pandemic. So can you confirm that that hole in public finances is not going to be plugged by austerity and by not recruiting staff?
We have a very clear commitment to the complement of the civil service as it was when we were elected, a complement that we have exceeded since we were elected. And in terms of austerity, I said on the 1st of May, which for people in the Socialist Party is a sacrosanct day, we will not be pursuing a policy of austerity because austerity hurts the weakest in our community. I'm totally committed to that. I am an anti-austerity politician, and it is not true for Ms. Hassan Naon to suggest the opposite. In fact, as the numbers will show, and as the bill will show and as the estimates will show, we will be increasing spending in respect of the health authority and not reducing spending. And so Ms. Hassan Naon, who knows that already because she has the estimates book, will have been shown to have misled you. And I'm sorry to say, I think she set out to mislead your interviewer and the people of Gibraltar.
By your own admission, there has been waste and abuse in the public sector. Can you put a figure on that?
It's impossible to have a figure on that. What we're trying to do is to say that in every department, we need to ensure that all of the good apples, who are the majority who are delivering the service, are not in any way let down by any bad apples that are wasting or are abusive. And this happens, unfortunately, in every organization. You have people who let down the organization in the private sector and in the public sector. We must root that out now, because we must ensure, as we find ourselves in the situation that every country in the world finds itself with its public finances under considerable pressure because of the pandemic, that we don't allow any leakage from our public finances in respect of abuse or waste.
Why has waste and abuse been allowed to happen in your watch? You've been in government some 10 years now. Why have you allowed that to happen?
What I'm telling you is that waste and abuse is something that you have to constantly be looking at. And I'm telling you it's not just in government, but in every organization that you have to constantly be dealing with the issue. We have been fighting against abuse and waste since we were elected, and we will continue to do so. But in particular, we will do that now because of the pressure on the public finances. We have to concentrate even further and knuckle down again on ensuring that there's no waste and no abuse. Of course, we've been in government for 9.5 years and not 10. I know that time flies when you're enjoying yourself. But we have to ensure that we get it right every month. And these 12 months of this financial year will be more important than ever.
The other issue raised by Together Gibraltar is inefficiencies in the housing sector. And certainly we've seen there's just under £5 million in arrears still owed to the government. That figure hasn't moved for some 2 years or so. And we also know anecdotally that there are people who've been living in government houses and haven't paid rents at all since they started living there. So what's being done about that?
Look, what I have to tell you is that you have at the moment a demonstration of one of the most efficient years in the operation of the housing department. We were able to hand over 176 homes which were refurbished during the COVID period, which is the highest number of homes refurbished in any 1 year and handed over when you're not dealing with the development of a new estate. You're looking at arrears which are lower than they were when we inherited them from the GSD, because we've been controlling that. But you're also looking at a period where everyone has expected that we should be careful in the way that we put pressure on people during the COVID year, and therefore for the past year, in the year that has gone, we didn't increase housing rents and we didn't put pressure on those who were finding themselves in a difficult situation and who couldn't pay their rent. What Ms. Hassan has to do is learn that in serious politics, you cannot hunt with the hare and run with the hounds. If you want us to be a little bit more restrained when it comes to chasing arrears in a COVID year because people are under particular pressure, then don't tell us the day after the COVID year is over that it's terrible that our arrears have gone up, because otherwise you will be seen to be trying to play both sides of the game.
Okay, what efficiencies are you planning in terms of government minister salaries and travel expenses? Two other points raised by Ms. Hassan.
Well, you've seen that there's been hardly any ministerial travel in the past year, and there's likely to be very little ministerial travel in the year to come. But of course, one thing that I cannot do is negotiate a treaty for Gibraltar, which will guarantee our economic well-being going forward if we're able to achieve it, without travelling. I cannot go to the United Nations to defend Gibraltar without travelling if they're not taking Zoom contributions and they're taking in-person contributions, and the Spanish ambassador is going to be there. And I cannot row across the Mediterranean. I am afraid I have to fund the cost of getting myself there. So the question is, do we want to take these easy populist approaches to politics, or do we have to understand that it's important that we move people in the way that we need to, which is efficient and not providing any largesse, but just the efficient movement of people in order to be able to defend Gibraltar's corner? And I think that that is something that we will be able to demonstrate we are doing. We have won 3 elections on the basis that we would do so, and I'm very proud of the work that we have done as a result of the travel that we have done.
And are you planning on conducting a review of government consultants and their salaries? After all, Sir Joe Bolsano did say in an interview with GBC that consultants sometimes brainwash government ministers.
I think you've got the wrong analogy. Joe Bolsano was saying it was contractors who brainwash ministers into spending more on projects. But when it comes to consultants, the government has very few consultants now. We've been reducing the number of consultants that we have. We aren't taking any new consultants on, and we're terminating the contracts of most, if not all, of those that remained.
Both opposition parties take aim at you because they say that if public finances had been managed more efficiently over the past years, particularly with events such as the music festival, which has cost some £3 million over a weekend, we would not be in this position. What do you say to that?
I think that's utter nonsense, and the people of Gibraltar know better. Every state in the world is suffering the effect of the COVID pandemic. You can accuse me of having spent £3 million on a music festival over a weekend. You would be wrong, and you would be lying to the public in Gibraltar. The cost might be £3 million, but the ticket recovery might be £2.5 million, and the cost of the show may be £500,000 as a result to the taxpayer. Now the question is it a better Gibraltar if we're organising cultural events which put Gibraltar on the map, which attract tourists to Gibraltar, etc., etc.? That's just one project. But look, what we're talking about here is how we have grown Gibraltar and what I have spent on. I'm very proud that Keith Asobali accuses me of being spendthrift, and that Roy Clinton says that I spend too much money. Because you know what I spent it on? I spent it on new schools. I spent it on new primary care centre for our children, a new primary care centre for adults. I spend it on a new headquarters for GBC. I spend it on new sports facilities, all of the things on which we are building a community. And I spend it on new affordable housing for Gibraltarians and the refurbishment of the existing estates. Now, it's very easy to say Picardo spends too much and not pinpoint what are the things that Picardo is spending on, because you don't want to pick a fight with the teachers who had their salary increased, with the workers in the health authority who have had their salary increased, with those who are being paid the minimum wage who have seen their salaries increased even when paid by the taxpayer. It's very easy to say spend less without pointing to the thing that you would not have spent on. And my challenge to Roy Clinton, to Malene Hassan, to Keith Asobali and to everyone else is to say what, apart from the music festival, what would you not have spent the money on? And let's do the tally of what those costs are, because I bet you none of them will have the gumption to say that they would not have increased the teachers' salaries, that they would not have increased the salaries of our health workers, that they would not have increased the salaries of our public servants. When push comes to shove, they want to pretend to spend less whilst committing themselves to spend more in order to try and garner votes. You just have to see the way that those who accuse me of spending too much are committing themselves to giving an extra £5 million a year to community care simply because they think that it is popular to do so and it might help them to win the next election. That's called buying votes, and I'm not in that game.